I will give a very short brief on interviewing, a scientific method that you find in many different disciplines, in social science discipline, in journalism, in anthropology, but also in technical disciplines, so requirements engineering, in information systems, user interfacing. Often interview is used as a method. And this will happen quite a lot also with your project. And therefore, we do a small exercise so that you get a feeling for what the issues are in doing a good interview. Very simply speaking, an interview is a conversation with other people, often one in some cases with a group, but a conversation with a purpose, getting to know something. In all books on research methodology, you will find extensive discussions of interviewing, but there are three main forms. An open interview, and basically you have a conversation with another person and your partner basically leads the conversation and you follow and make notes. You have, at the other hand, what is called a structured interview. And then basically you as a researcher have all the questions and also what the possible answers are. So that's the other extreme. And you find that, for example, in quantitative surveys where you have to fill in boxes. And then basically often it can be on paper, but sometimes it's also done by telephone. And then in between you have a semi-structured interview where you do not just follow the conversation, but you have a kind of agenda that you want to follow, but what the answers are that's open to your partner. And we expect that what you will do in your project, often you start with quite open interviews, certainly if you meet a person for the first time. But then if you are further in your project, it's more specific what you want to know. And then you move more into a semi-structured interview. Scientific methods are good at certain things and not so good at other things. That's also holds for the interview method. An open interview is good for exploring opinions of people or attitudes or what they think about things. And it's also good to find out about things that everyone knows. Semi-structured interviews are good for if you want to do refinement or a check of what you find in open interviews. It's a conversation with a purpose. You have open and semi-structured interviews, and they are good for explorations of opinions and attitudes and interests or a refinement of that. And there are things that one need to avoid. You have to carefully think about the questions you are asking. Long questions are often misunderstood, so keep your questions short. Sentences, questions that are a combination of several questions is also confusing. So you are not going to ask, how old are you and are you married and how many children do you have? Split that into 2 or 3 or the elementary part. What is also important, certainly if you have a certain technical background, then jargon, language that the interviewee will not understand, you should avoid that. So do it in plain and simple language that your partner can understand. What is also something to avoid is making questions that have assumptions so that they lead your partner into something. So for example, if you ask, why do you like X, then you are actually assuming that your partner likes it. And that might be wrong, but for politeness, they will not say, well, I simply do not like it. So you are moving them into a certain direction. And also is certainly in this very international and cross-cultural course, every one of us has certain biases and prejudices about other people. And you have to carefully phrase your questions that you do not get this bias that is often unconscious. Let's start with the interviewing exercise. And the idea is as follows. Put into pairs and you interview one colleague student for 10 minutes on very basic personal profile questions. For example, who are you? Where do you come from? What are your interests in this course? What is your motivation to participate? And what are your expectations about the course? As you may have noticed, in Canvas, you can write something about yourself in a kind of personal profile. And actually, the idea here is that this exercise is asking about your personal profile. And I will keep this on for you as a help. Then doing the exercise, if you interview a person, you always have to ask for permission in the first place. You also, it's often recommended to record it via your smartphone, but it is always wise to make notes as well. In this exercise, we run the interview for 10 minutes. Then the idea is that interviewer and interviewee switch roles. So first student A interviews student B, and then student B interviews student A on precisely the same topic, also for 10 minutes. And then afterwards, you basically work out the interview in a person profile of the colleague you have been interviewing. And that should be no longer than 100 words. And then you submit that to your interviewee. And your interviewee can do with it whatever he or she wants. Is that clear? And are there any questions?